All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Two Stewards Show. My name is Brent. I'm here with Mark. Actually, I'm not here. Mark is. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Mark is far away from me, but we are connected via technology.
Mm-hmm.
Thankful for that. To talk about biblical stewardship. And this is really important because last time we talked a little bit about the context we live in. As investors, we live in a world that's filled with sin. And obviously, Mark and I shared a little bit about our Christian faith, our background. We touched on that. And today we want to talk a little bit more about defining biblical stewardship. So, first of all, what does a steward mean? Like, what is a steward? And then within the biblical framework, what are some pieces of advice, things that we can learn and glean from biblical stewardship, and what are some principles that we can have in place when we're going out and we're making financial decisions so we can make wise financial decisions. Maybe that's the entire goal of this podcast, Mark. I don't know.
Probably. I also want to know who is Steward and why is he in a ship?
Oh, we got to get that. We got to take that button away from you. I don't know.
I discovered a soundboard, and maybe I should close that. But yeah, you're right. We gotta talk about stewardship because that is our whole. I don't know,
Schneck?
raison d'être. It's our,
Yeah,
why we're doing what we're doing. Because we're stewards. So, and we alluded to this last episode as well, right? We don't get into all of this on every episode. Some episodes we're just getting right into a real estate strategy, but this is sort of our foundation, what's in the back of our heads, and
yeah. So maybe
for the way that we look at things.
So just to start off, like, what is a steward? Because people say, "What's your website?" or like, "What's your company called?" And like I say, "Good Stewards." It's like, okay, how do you spell that? And like they think it's stewards.
Yeah,
So maybe the word
Stuart Little.
steward is not that common. We don't use it that much in everyday language. But I think
No,
people generally understand what a steward is. But maybe we just define
not
what a
everybody does.
steward is.
Well, so yeah, a steward is someone that's entrusted with someone else's um, stuff, I guess. So generally, that could be a household, it could be property. So biblically, a steward would run his master's house. He would generally take care of all the business affairs and sometimes domestic affairs as well. And so if we look at our lives, yeah, we have different areas of stewardship. So, the one that we're talking about is primarily financial, but you can't sort of separate
Yeah,
that from the other areas, right? We're both fathers, so we have children,
yeah.
and we don't often talk about being stewards for children, but at the end of the day, they're not our children. They're fellow
Yeah,
saints. They're God's children. They're brothers and sisters in Christ, and we are stewarding them. And we have, certain obligations. So we have a responsibility for what happens to them, and we have authority over them as well. Just like a steward would have responsibility over his master's household, like he would have a great amount of authority, to and also trust, obviously, to run that household.
yeah.
And I mean,
And
if
the other
people aren't
thing,
familiar with the biblical example, anyone who's watched like the Lord of the Rings, you have the right the stewards of Gondor. So this was the line of people that kind of watched over the throne of Gondor until the true king could return, and Tolkien had some pretty strong biblical themes in his writings, and that's kind of borne out there as well, right? But the idea is that this family, this line, was kind of watching over this kingdom, taking care of it in the absence of the one of the true heirs, right? The
the
true king.
actual owner.
Yeah, the one who actually had the rightful authority to rule. And the problem there was
Yeah,
that they got ahead of themselves and really viewed the kingdom as their own, right? Instead of just theirs to take care of, it was now their kingdom. They didn't want to give up the authority for that kingdom and all the benefits that accrue to it. And that's kind of like us as well, right? We too
yeah,
often view our possessions, our lives, our children, anything that's in our lives as our own and not belonging to God. And so, in our context, when we're talking about stewardship, we're talking about financial stewardship. And yeah, everything that we have, we kind of look at like, well, I worked hard for that, right? I
yeah,
worked hard and I saved and I invested wisely, whatever the case may be. That's mine. And God says, no, it's not yours. It can all be taken away in an instant
yeah. Like the
if
important thing
if I
to
want.
remember is that, um, like a steward, the action that the steward is doing, like he's managing or he's supervising or he's looking after things, right? And he's doing all of these things uh, on somebody else's property or on behalf of somebody else. So you're doing all of these things, but you're really taking care of someone else's possessions, someone else's
Yeah,
money. And if you think about that with your life, and we know the perspective that we have is, all of the things that we have are gifts. Okay, so also our money is a gift that we've been given by God. So really, and like you said too, it's God's money. You gave the example of children, like it's God's children. Like these are things that are entrusted to us and into our care. So how do we manage them? How do we supervise them? How do we look after them? It's in that context that they do not belong to us. And I always think back to one example when I was a kid because um, it's kind of stuck with me because we would go to the library and get library books, right?
hmm
And we had this book, like this book box, this wicker basket thing beside our couch. We put all the books in, right? So like they get mixed up. We get library books and you get some of your own books or whatever, and other siblings' books in there. And we would jump off of the couch into the box, right? Just because it's fun. So my
yeah,
mom would always say, like, guys, like those aren't your books. Like you have to show respect for them, right? And it's like it's okay to treat your own books however you'd want to treat them, but with the library books, like you got to take these things back, and they better be in better shape than when you got them. So it always kind of stuck in the back of my head, just as an example of living that out. Like it's not your stuff, right? And that like that's a library book, so it's not the greatest consequence. But like if someone entrusts you, like anything, their car, right? How are you going to take it back? How are you going to fill it up with gas and clean it, and here you go? Or you're gonna, I just got a little bit of a scuff on it the other day when I drove it past this thing, and it's empty, but you can fill it up, and it's a little bit
yeah,
dirty. Like, how do you treat other people's stuff? And like, as a steward, in the biblical context, that actually applies to everything in your life because technically
yeah,
everything is given to you. So that's the way you should look at everything you have, right? Or you are while you're talking here.
yeah. And how do you view those things in your life then? Right? Because people, we make idols all the time. Right? I think John Calvin said our hearts are idol factories, and you can easily see that with wealth, where people turn that into an idol, and the Bible talks about mammon and how you can actually serve mammon, right? You're serving your own earthly wealth, but that also can apply to other things in your lives, right? Like your spouse or your children, right? People will elevate their children to idol status and overdo it with them, and or if you have that ideal and then your children or maybe your spouse doesn't live up to it, well, then you need to go find one that actually does live up to those, to idol status, something that you can actually, if they're not reaching that, then you find someone else that does. your
Are
wealth,
you
but
saying,
even
wait,
ourselves.
you're not recommending that we go and find,
No, I don't recommend you do that.
okay, let's just
But I'm saying
clarify
this,
that.
when we're talking about stewardship, we lose fact of the idea that it's not ours, and then we can end up worshiping that thing that we're supposed to be stewarding,
Serving.
right? So we do
Yes,
that with
yeah,
wealth and even ourselves, right? That's
yeah,
sort of the biggest idol we can have is our own selves. Our
yeah,
lives are not our own; they were bought at a price. So, like you said, we need to take care of them and
yeah.
realize that they're not our own. But we forget that very quickly, and everything becomes
And I
about
think
us.
the other thing too is that, like, it takes work to do that, right? Like, if your life is not your own, you have to, or you've been blessed with money, or you've been blessed with like a good job and a nice family or whatever. Like, those are all blessings, and you can kind of enjoy them. But then also, like, you have to work to actually steward things, and that requires a bit of educate. Like, you got to be out there, kind of building and flexing those muscles, like we talked about before, right? Like, if you are intellectually inclined and you want to study or whatever, like, flex those muscles, learn things,
Hmm.
grow, right? There's so many opportunities. And then, like, if you're, skilled, like you want to work in trades or use your skills that way, and you've been blessed that way, then do those things and work and try and learn and hone those skills and get better and better and better, right? And then you
Yeah,
can be of service to more and more people as well.
and so here's something a little bit counterintuitive, right? We often talk about blessings, and we always associate blessings with positive things, right? So if I work hard, God blesses my work. I'll see results, and generally that means like I'll make money, or
Yeah,
I will be blessed with children, or blessed with a good spouse, or good health. All these things, um, but God doesn't just bless us with the positive things that we talk about, right? It could be financial hardship, or it could be sickness, or it could be other circumstances in your life that God blesses you with. And it's so hard for us to understand that, right? If we have sickness, until you've been through it, you talk to someone who's been through some of these things and they have a good view on it, that this was a blessing in my life. And this is what I needed at that time, maybe to strengthen my relationship with God, or maybe as an example to other people of how to live while having, maybe it's a chronic illness or going through financial hardship or whatever else, right? So we don't we don't think of these things as blessings, and we certainly don't think of them as things to steward either. And this is not really the point of our podcast, right? We're talking about taking care of, generally, of
classic.
financial resources that we've been given. But I just want to make that point that there are different ways of stewarding your blessings, and they're not always what you think. And
Yeah,
I mean, that is a lesson in real estate investing as well. When you talk to a seasoned real estate investor, most of them have made mistakes, most of them have lost money, and they will freely acknowledge, like, this is how I got better. So you
yeah,
use those things to your advantage, and hopefully to the advantage of other people. So that's part of the reason we're doing the podcast too, right? We can share some of our failures and the things that we've learned, so that hopefully other people don't do them.
yeah,
But yeah, I just want to make that point that there's all kinds of different blessings and all kinds of different things that you can steward.
yeah. And there's definitely, like, when people share what they've been through, what mistakes they've made, and you can avoid those. And the other thing too is, if somebody, like, we all do make mistakes, right? Like, we can't, unless Mark, I don't
I
know,
mean,
you
most of us.
make, yeah, most, okay. Well, most of us make mistakes, and so when you kind of show your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses, like, it starts to build, trust, and people can see, hey, you know what, like, I can do this too, because I would have made that same mistake. I could totally see what happened there, and thank you for sharing that. I'd love to pick your brain, and maybe we can do something together. And yeah,
Yeah, so there's spiritual benefits, but so often we see that when there's a spiritual benefit to something, is often followed by a material or a physical benefit, and not in the sense of um, God will bless, like we talked about that already, prosperity gospel. He will bless you financially if you do X, but often a lot of this stuff is just common sense as well, right? So if you
Yeah,
do the right thing, that is the right thing. And practically speaking, it has positive effects in your life,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that's important to highlight too. Is that like as a steward, um, you make thoughtful decisions, right, and responsible investments. So if you're managing someone else's wealth, like you gave the biblical example of a steward in the Bible times who maybe has a master, and he kind of just says, you know what, manage my entire household, my estate, or all of my affairs, and you have a tremendous amount of responsibility, and that means that you have this responsibility. You also have to take responsible decisions. Then, right? Like you're going to weigh the pros and the cons. You're going to educate yourself and try and find out: is this the right decision? Is this the wrong decision? And you put a lot of thought into it, and that's a good approach, right? Like a good sound approach to investing is to not be rash. So, because on the one hand, we have not doing anything is kind of frowned upon, and on the other hand,
Yep.
we have doing something quickly and without thinking, without proper consideration. That's the other extreme, right? And we want to kind of be in the middle where we're taking prudent action, like we're doing things, we're stewarding well, like as in we're not squandering something, we're not just idly sitting by and letting things happen to us. But on the other hand, we're also not over. Um, sorry, we're also taking. So we're taking action, but we're also not.
Well, we're not going overboard and being too risky, right?
Yeah, like we're not just going out there and let's buy the first house we see. Like in the context of real estate investing, like I
Yeah.
heard you could get rich quick doing this, right? And without doing proper due diligence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
and then I guess the other thing that ties in with this is how we talked about this before as well, but the inclinations of your heart being generous towards other people. And if you a big part of stewardship is being generous, being prepared to give, because realizing that we are stewarding these things on behalf of someone, right? So if God has entrusted us our money, for example, um, you know, it's ultimately His.
Hmm.
So therefore, we should manage it in a way that acknowledges His wishes. So, and what is one of His wishes is that we be generous and giving, kind, like willing to share, right? So, if we're just stewards of the wealth we have, um, we have to use it according to how the Master wants us to. And that's a tough thing to do because it's so easy to think like I've come up with this myself. Like if you put in work and you get paid, like it's so like it's an earthly perspective to think I've done this work, I got paid, it's mine, and I don't want to
Yeah.
give it to anybody. I don't want but that's an unbiblical way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're entrusted with somebody else's wealth or possessions or whatever it is. It's not yours. And yeah, we read that God loves a cheerful giver. And there's two things in there, right? One is giver. So that means God loves it when we give. And just in the same way, if you if you're giving your child an allowance, maybe they're too young to work, but they get an allowance, right? If they are giving at church, if they putting some of that money into the collection like that, that's beautiful to see, right? Or if they, maybe not at church, but um, fundraising for something, for a worthy cause. And when your kids are like being selfless and giving some or maybe all of their money away to that cause, like that's awesome to see. So that's the giving part. And then the other word in there is cheerful. And so not begrudging, not miserly, right? Not like, oh, okay, I'll do it because I have to, but I don't really want to. We know that like God wants our hearts. He doesn't need our money. He doesn't need
Yeah.
any of that stuff. It's all his anyways. But what he really wants is our heart. So we need to have a good attitude about doing that. And I think you need to be content with what you have, with what God, whatever circumstances you're in, and you can certainly work hard to better those or to change those. But if you're not generally just content with life, whether you're rich or poor, then
Yeah. Whether you have a lot or whether you have a little, be content with what you have.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, but then contentment is definitely what we need to have. But it's also like if you're content and you take that to mean, I'm not going to do anything, then now we're going
yeah,
back to
complacent is not content,
yeah.
right? The only
So maybe
reason
we
you
need to
can
just make
really,
that clear.
yeah, and like the only real reason for contentment would be to know that this life is just it's a shadow of the one that's to come, so that whatever
Right.
happens to you doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
You need to praise God any way you can. But that's really the source of true contentment, right? When you're not worried about it. You can think about it, you can act on it, you can be responsible, but if you're not truly not worried about it, then that's true contentment, I think. And then it's so much easier to deal with the rest of all the rest of problems that life throws at you.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
yeah,
like
like you said, don't be
investing and
complacent.
yeah, investing in money is only one small part of life. I mean, it's important, and
Yep.
like you and I, we spend a lot of time in this realm thinking about it and talking to people about it, and in our business. But yeah, it's only one small piece of life, right? There's so many different aspects to life that if you're not content across the board in your eternal future, then yeah, that's not good.
No, no, sir. So,
Um,
okay. So, did we cover stewardship? Do you think? I think we defined that fairly
yeah,
clearly.
I mean, we can do a bit of blabbing, but no, we're
Yeah.
good.
No, because we're talking about Christian stewardship principles, and we wanted to kind of get into investing, right? So
Yeah,
that's a question that people have: can Christians invest? Right?
like
If
is
you're
that a
really content,
stewardly
then
action to take for a Christian? Like if we say we got to be content, okay, good, but you can't be complacent. We got to take action, but it's got to be well thought out and reasoned.
yeah,
So should we invest?
yeah. And I mean, there's a few examples. If you want, just like a text, right? Then you could look at the parable of the three stewards, as we often reference, um, where again the point of the parable isn't necessarily the surface level that you get, right? But it's about using the talents, the opportunities that God has given to you
Yeah,
to.
maybe I don't know where our listeners are at, but maybe you want to just define what a parable is, because um,
Oh, sure,
so,
yeah.
so
So a
people
parable
understand.
is like a lesson wrapped up in a story. So Jesus used parables all the time,
But it's a
and it
story that would have been relevant to the listeners, right? Like somewhat like
yeah.
a really easy to understand story that would have resonated with the listener.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't always easy to understand. Like if you don't want, and that I think, and Jesus addressed that
Yeah,
too,
but
right? If you don't want
they
to
would have
understand, you won't. But generally, yes, it should be accessible for
yeah, but
people.
was it
And
yeah exactly accessible to the folks at the time.
yeah, so Jesus used parables as a big way to explain, just to give lessons to people, right? And I think that's still true for today. If you want to give an example or teach somebody something, it's much easier to tell them a story. People understand stories, and that resonates and it sticks in their mind much more than just facts. So, if you're trying to get something across, tell it in a story format, and people will remember that as opposed to just statistics or something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus used parables all the time, and there's so many different levels and layers in these parables. So the parable of the three stewards, um, and maybe we should just kind of briefly retell the parable
Yeah.
for people who might not be familiar. But yeah,
Maybe we need to
we're a
have a third
master.
steward on this show to
I know.
fill us.
A little a mascot or something. Maybe we should advertise. Okay, we're looking for a third steward. But in this it's the parable of a master, and he has three stewards, three fellows that are taking care of his household in some capacity. And he says, "I'm going away for a while, and I'm going to give you some money." Talents. So talent was not like an ability, but it was a measure of money at the time. And they each got a certain amount of talents. And then one of them invested wisely and got a very good return on the money he had invested. The next one invested wisely as well. Didn't get quite the same return, but still did fairly well. And then the last
Yeah,
one,
he also started out. They got different amounts, right? So the one started out with 5,
yeah,
and the other one
yeah.
had
But if you
4.
look on, I don't know, can we do ROI? Maybe we shouldn't get into that. Right, but comparatively, one did better, one did pretty
Yeah,
good, and then one didn't do anything because yeah, he was, I guess, we don't initially know, but he just kind of hid the money in the ground till the master came back. And then the master came back and he says, "Okay, show me what you've produced." And the first two did well, and he praised them even though there's differing amounts. And then the last fella said, "Well, I was afraid and of what you'd say, and you're a harsh master, and so here's the money that you gave me." And it was only a small amount, but the point is he didn't do anything with it, and the master, obviously got him in trouble and said, especially like if you knew I was a harsh master, then you should have worked even harder to produce something good. Um, so, in the first place, it's not about money. Money is the example that Jesus used, but he used many different examples, right? Agriculture and other things too. So, that doesn't mean we have to apply those necessarily to that, although there is that aspect. But the first lesson really is spiritual, right? Using the opportunities that God has given to you, and primarily that would be spreading the gospel. Not even so much like using your natural abilities or whatever, but we also have the parable of the sower, and he reaps a harvest, or he sows and then eventually will reap a harvest. How are we sowing, and what kind of harvest are we reaping in terms of spreading the gospel, telling other people? So I think
yeah,
that's the sort of primary lesson of that parable. But as always with parables, there's different layers, and we can also use that to kind of understand a little bit about finances, which is how we're using it, right? That's the parable of the three stewards, very loosely. I mean, you should probably go read it yourself, but
yeah,
loosely paraphrased. And I think, yeah,
yeah.
the thing that we
So
most often get from that is when God gives you opportunities or things to, maybe it's wealth, whatever it is, use them wisely and use them for his glory, but use them wisely and make the most of them. So, do you
yeah,
agree, Brent?
I agree. I think there's a lot to study in this parable. Maybe we could do an episode on that entire parable.
We
Now that
could,
we've gone
or
through
we
the
could
whole
just,
thing.
go to
But I
church
think our
and,
question off the top was, should Christians invest? And this parable is an
yeah,
example of illustrating an example of, um, yeah, putting your money to work so that it earns a return, right?
yeah. And I mean, Jesus also used this, like you said, it was easy to understand. People understood the context of that, and he didn't say you shouldn't invest. He used this specifically, I think, specifically because it would be easy for people to understand, and it's an acceptable practice. That it
Yeah,
is something reasonable to do. He wouldn't have used that or he would have made the point that you shouldn't invest, but he didn't at all. He just said this is the
yeah,
sort of the framework, and this is a good and useful thing to do.
Yeah. And then, like the, I guess to invest when your heart is set on the monetary reward solely, um, and I'm speaking about like loving money, right? Like serving money, doing
Yeah.
the investment for the money, primarily or solely, is um, like that's not what we're doing here, right? We're trying to avoid making money the idol, like you mentioned, mammon as a god in place, like in a substitute position for God in your life that you worship, that you serve. You wake up in the morning, you do something to get money, for money's sake, because we all do have to get up and work. We all have to like steward our time and talents, like to do that, but and we get money as a result. But when we serve money and when we idolize money, that's where we go off the rails.
And ultimately, if you're serving money, really you're serving yourself, right? You're
Yeah,
not. It's not like you're doing the bidding of a pile of gold or something for its own sake, but it's for your sake. So it could start out with intentions like it's for my, for my security or for my family's security, but then it very
yeah,
quickly can morph into
very
something else.
selfless.
Yeah, yeah, it becomes selfish, and it's the worship of self in most cases, right? And people will frame it all kinds of different ways, like you got to take care of yourself, or live life the way that you want it, and you can only do that if
Yeah.
you have financial
Well, that's
freedom.
why like Jesus frequently says how hard it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven, just because when you have this wealth, you tend to serve it, right? And you, yeah, you put it in the place of God, and then it takes over your life, and you neglect to serve God.
And it's also the pursuit of wealth too, right? We've talked before about building habits and how, like, if you're not whatever, if you're not a cheerful giver now when you're, let's say, a needy student,
Yeah,
you're probably not going to be one later in life when you've achieved some degree of success financially. So in that pursuit of wealth, that's where you're building habits, and that's where you kind of fill your mind, because it's not, yeah, for a rich man for sure, but for those aspiring to be rich as well, right? Like, why are you doing that, and how hard are you working, and how much of your life are you devoting um, to getting there, right? Because you often see that where people are absolutely consumed with building their net worth, or I'm going to retire before the time I'm 30, or whatever that goal is, right? It's that pursuit that really focuses your mind, and yeah, the habits that you build in doing that, right? Where once you get there, then it's hard to lose those habits because you spent so much time. um, it's just like working out a certain way, right? Once you get to that end result, it's very hard to change your habits because that's how you've
yeah,
been for your whole life. So
yeah. Oh man, can't teach an old dog new tricks.
something like that.
That's not in the Bible, is it?
I don't think so.
Not word for word.
No, no. But yeah, so investing, can we invest, I guess, is the did we address that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
already asked you that 4 times.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm not getting any younger. But yeah, I think have we established then that investing is indeed okay,
I think
provided
so.
you have the right mindset, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to, I can't remember, we talked about this time or last time, where we talked about, like, people will say you shouldn't invest because God will take care of you, and just let God provide, right? And that's that.
yeah,
I think that's a very complacent. Some people are genuine in that, and some people are just being complacent or lazy, I think, when they say that, and
right.
that is an excuse not to go out and not to achieve anything.
Yeah.
So,
But
um,
yeah, it ultimately comes down to the attitude in your heart when you're investing or when you're seeking wealth, that you're doing it. yeah, for the right reasons, I guess. It's not, how do you, you cannot serve, like the Bible is very clear, you cannot serve God and money. So when you play that out in reality, it's like, maybe we can just talk about this because a lot of the time, like a lot of your waking hours are spent pursuing money, right? Like for
Yeah.
somebody, maybe like if you have a career, right? If you're a student, or if you're at home watching kids, or like whatever, maybe you don't actively pursue money all day long. But for everyone in the workforce who is trying to either run a business or work as an employee, like you spend a lot of your time every day trying to get money. So it
Yeah.
can very easily come into your head like, today I'm getting up, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to get paid, and it's my money, and I'm going to do with it what I want. And then because investing is really taking that accumulation of savings or wealth that you've already built up and then putting it to work for you. So when you get to the step where you're actually investing the money now, you have this like sense in my heart, like this is my money and I worked hard for it, and I'm entitled to whatever with it, and it's a selfish attitude, right?
Yeah.
And that's really easy to slip into.
Yeah. And I might go so far as to say, like, if you are not investing in whatever way, shape, or form, like maybe you're being a little bit irresponsible, right? The Bible has plenty of examples of like that was also a pursuit. That's always been a pursuit, not always for money, but for basic sustenance, right? And you read, story after story in the Bible. Jesus tells parables about workers in the vineyard, right? So yeah, people are working to make money. That was like it's just understood. That's we devote a lot of our time to doing that, whether that's working in our own vineyard or working in someone else's vineyard, whatever the case may be. That's fine. The looking again through the whole Bible, everything you do, do it well, and do it to the glory of God. So that means you probably should work hard at something and make the most of the opportunities that you're given. And then that would include if you have accumulated spare capital, but if you've accumulated capital that you don't need right now, you can let that sit. And we've talked about our money system, how
Yeah, that's
if
especially
you
relevant. Right?
let that sit now, you're wasting it. Like you're plainly wasting it because of inflation and money debasement. That money that you've worked for is just gonna um,
Yeah,
like what was the point of you working hard for that? There wasn't much point, right? And you're certainly not making the most of the opportunity that you have. If you have a nest egg or whatever you want to call it, then make the most of that. And that doesn't mean be obsessed with it, but just like with work, right? Make the most of it, work hard, but don't be obsessed with it. Anything that you have, don't be
yeah,
obsessed, right? Be obsessed with God. But yeah, my
yeah,
my point is like I think there are certain circumstances where if you're not investing, you're not making the most of it, and you should be.
yeah, yeah. Because stewarding your wealth wisely means like you're going into action, you're doing something, and in the context of today's world where money is based on nothing, right? Like we talked about this before, we're going to talk about it again because
Yep.
we want to learn about it and we want people to be educated about it. If your money can be printed into existence, and you become aware of this through educating yourself, right? Like you're increasing your financial literacy, you're learning, hey, you know what? Like, money's not really based on anything. That's one, like us just talking right now is like a light, it could be a light bulb, right? It's like, oh, now what does stewarding my wealth wisely look like in a world where if I don't invest or if I don't do something with the money that I've been blessed with, it's going to lose value. What does that look like, right? Like now I have to invest, or now it's the prudent thing to do is to put that money into something that does not lose value. Um, Maybe
Yeah,
that's
and
just
that
me doing subliminal
no, no,
sales
I think
pitch.
you're right. And that doesn't always mean that you're going to go like invest in mutual funds, or which, you know, maybe a bad
Let me
example,
guess, real
but
estate, Mark?
no. So it could be like you invest in real estate, you invest in the stock market, but you could also invest in kingdom work,
Yeah,
right? Maybe that's the best use of the money at the time. And obviously that means that that capital goes away, but like you can go get more.
yeah,
Um, that could be also a very good use of it, right? So when we say in investing, you know, our focus is on real estate investing for with a Christian worldview. So we're always going to talk about that. But I just want to kind of put it out there. That's not always the only way that you can invest, right? If you invest
yeah. Like
in,
maybe the investment you need to make right now is taking some of that money and going on vacation with your family because you never spend time with them.
yeah, it totally could be, right? Or making, people do renovations to make their house nicer, but maybe you need to invest in hospitality, in making a
Yeah,
home that is more inviting and more accessible so that you can host people, right? Or maybe you just have a bigger portion of your budget on entertaining, and not like having parties, but
parties.
like having people over and sharing the gospel with them. So but yeah, for our purposes, we're talking about financial investing. And I think for like we've laid out a lot of reasons. I did that in my book as well, like why I think real estate investing is the best vehicle for most middle class, for most regular people in North America, anyways. It just provides the best opportunities for folks to make the most of of what they have, of their capital, of their investment.
Ooh.
So yeah.
So maybe next time we talk about specifically how real estate fits into this. You want to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's probably this is probably a good idea, because that could be a whole, yeah, like you said, a whole nother episode on itself. And then there's also the concept of borrowing to invest, which yeah, can be. I always took it for granted, but there's some strong opinions about that as well. So I think maybe
Yeah.
we'll delve into that next time, because that is an integral part of real estate investing is borrowing, and there can be good borrowing and bad borrowing. So
Yeah, and for us to like make the show better and help more people, I think we'd really love to have feedback. So if anybody has comments on what we're saying, has disagrees with what we're saying, we love to engage with that material. That's part of our learning too and our journey. So I try to put Mark on the spot, and I think he does a better job putting me on the spot. I didn't know about Spanish galleons, and I'm not up to date on all the latest Lord of the Rings, whatever.
Oh, Brent, so much to do. I mean, I need to invest in some new movie nights with you, I think.
Yeah, culture. All right.
But yeah,
Yeah. Thanks.
we wrap up there.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. Until next time, steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.